Usually some commands like the delete, the update, the insert have irreversible make irreversible changes to your data. So transactions are a single unit of work. If a transaction is successful, the changes are permanent. But then what about when you make a mistake? Like, look at the commands that we have on the screen. Someone applied a delete to the customer order table and wiped out all of the entire records. Someone else did an update. Instead of using 1.05, they put in salary multiplied by 0.5. Somebody else inserted data with misaligned columns, and they ended up inserting, for example, Joe into the address column. So if they had used a transaction, perhaps they could have had the opportunity to examine the data first of all before making the changes permanent. So the transaction command in t-sql is equivalent of when you press the undo key in maybe Microsoft Word or in Excel. So before we go on to see how to make use of this, let's have another look at, there is a page 2 to this note, and I'm going to link these notes as usual in the description so that you can read further or even reference the actual Microsoft manual on this. So transactions, it's a complex command, but we're going to look at the simplest form of it. You initiate the beginning of a transaction by saying begin transaction, and then whatever operations you perform like delete, insert, update remains within a scope until you say commit. When you say commit, the changes are permanent. You also have the option to say rollback instead of commit, and then you undo all of the changes that you've just done. So usually a regular command, like when you say delete from a table name, is actually a transaction that has a commit at the end of it. So the difference is that this time around you are in control. You can either commit or roll back. So let's just have a look at this diagram down here, which further explains it. So when you say begin command, you apply your change like a delete, like an insert, like an update, etc. You have a look, maybe use a select statement to have a look at the changes that you've done. And if you are happy, you commit and it becomes permanent. Or you roll back to the state you were before you began the transaction. So enough of this, let's go and have a look at the actual thing in operation. So here, assuming, and this is still us working with the data, the internet hours usage data that we loaded the other day. For those of you who weren't there, the lesson is updates, the lesson on bulk insert. So let's assume that there is a further requirement for us to make these changes. So management has said we need to change all occurrences of mobile data to just mobile in the internet type column. So let's have a look at the data first of all to see. Remember, this was our table, the daily internet usage demo. So the requirement is to come into this column and change all of the occurrences of mobile data to just mobile. Now, that's a very simple change to do. But before we go ahead, I think I have this other command here so that we can have, we can see how many records should be impacted. So these are all of the records that should be impacted. If I look down here, I have 1,392 rows to change. Now, usually somebody will just go ahead and apply a command like this. And deliberately, I have introduced a problem here. If you see, this will be a blanket change to the entire internet type column, including all of the ones that are mobile data or not. And this will be a typical mistake scenario. Luckily, we have transactions, But as we're going now, this person trying to make this change isn't using a transaction. So let's see what's going to happen. If we run this, boom, we've changed 2,800 records. If we now look, let's run from here to there, we would see that everything has now been changed. This is one of those situations where that can cost you your job even, or create a problem at work where someone has gone ahead and changed data, especially if there are no backups, then it will be a problem. So this is the typical kind of scenario where you want to, before making these type of changes, you want to start by creating a transaction, go ahead and do the change, examine the data, and commit them if you're happy. So now let's try to bring back our data the way it was. What I'm going to do is to just clear out the data and reload them again. So if you remember from the last class, from the bulk insert, we created a couple of commands to refresh the table, clear and refresh the table. So I'm going to truncate the table. I had this all written down already. I'll truncate the table. So I've cleared out all of the records, and then I'm going to go ahead and bulk insert the records again so that we can continue with our transaction lesson. So I've loaded the data again. I'm going to go back to that tab from where we started from. So this will be the mistake scenario, or the risky scenario where someone didn't think about using a transaction. So if we were to do it the correct, less risky way, such a change, we would, let us first look at the data again just to be sure we have changed everything. So we had 1,392 records that qualify for this change. They are back there, mobile data 1392. And let's look at everything I'm going to run up to here. So we have the mixture again. Everything is back the way it was. Now, if I was going to do this type of change using the begin transaction operation, we would start by saying begin transaction. Once you do that, SQL Server wraps every operation henceforth so that you can undo whatever change you are going to apply from now going forward. They don't become permanent until you say commit or until you roll back. So a transaction has just started. So now let's go ahead and do the same mistake again. Instead of putting a where clause, we are going to go ahead and do this. So we make the mistake again. Everything gets changed. Let's have a look. Let's say, have a look at everything. We see that everywhere is changed. And this is where you say, oops, I've made a mistake. So even if we look at this, oops, there are no records anymore. So now, unfortunately for us, we began by saying begin transaction. So we can say rollback, which is the equivalent of undo. So we're going to say rollback transaction. It has completed it. So if I go back here again and look, I'm going to see my 1,392 records restored back. Ooh, they are all restored back. If we run from here to there, we will see we now have the mixture of the different types. So we just successfully undid the mistake that we did. So once you put rollback or you put commit, the transaction ends. So let's go back again now and do it the correct way and then commit. So we begin the transaction again, because once you said rollback, the transaction ended. So I'm going to begin another transaction, execute, and then I'm going to do it correctly this time. What was missing is we did not scope, we did not indicate which records need to change. We did not put a where clause. That has been the mistake up to now. So we're going to go ahead and say update internet type to mobile, wherever internet type is mobile data. So let's try to do this. Remember, we had 1,392 records from our initial check up there. So this is looking like it's correct. So now let's see if there are still any records left that have mobile data. None. So let us see if there are any records with just mobile. I'm going to copy that, come down here, paste, and then just close that there and do this. Let me run. If you look down there, 1,392, or let me allow it to display on screen, count and then run this. 1,392 is what we expect. So it looks like everything is fine. So we might as well commit the transaction. This will make it permanent. So up to this point, you have the option to commit or to roll back. So now we are happy with what we're seeing. We can say commit. So now everything becomes permanent. So if you search for this, we shouldn't see any records with mobile data anymore, but we should see 1,392 records with just mobile. So that's the end of the lesson. But keep in mind that we should keep transactions very short. Long transactions, what we mean by this is if your transaction is working on huge amounts of records, it's going to be a bit heavy on the system. So you can update in batches if needed. So, but that's the end of it. You can use transactions to undo changes that you've done to data. So you have the option to roll back, you have the option to commit. And that's the end. All of the notes will be linked up in the description section. There will be links to Microsoft documentation so that you can read further if you like. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.